In what has inadvertently become a personal quest of mine to remove bullshit from miniature painting, we're going to talk this week about colour theory. Hello, YouTube. Yeah. Colour theory is a scary one. I could forgive you if you clicked off right now and said, nope, I don't want to watch a video about colour theory. That's a head fuck. That's going to take me ages to get my head around. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be enjoyable. Please, I beg of you, indulge me just for a few moments. Okay. Colour theory is one of those things that is riddled with terminology and complex ideas, and people don't really seem to make a lot of effort to put it over succinctly. I think I've got a pretty simple way of explaining it that really helps. So I'm going to give you a bit of a rundown today of the sort of main aspects of colour theory that apply to miniature painting. And I'm going to do it in such a way where I'm not going to expect you to kind of learn too much in the way of jargon. There's going to be a couple of, there's going to be a couple of jargonistic words, but they're going to be explained every time they appear, so that way when you hear them in the future, you're going to understand them. That said, the best way to learn this is visually. So let's go and look at some footage that explains colour theory, and hopefully I'm not going to ruin anyone's day. Right, the first thing we're going to look at is something called complementary colours. Basically, this is just two colours on the colour wheel. This is a colour wheel, by the way, that look good together. And the easiest way to find a complement is two colours that are opposite each other on the colour wheel. So you see with these oranges, they look pretty good with all of these kind of aqua blues, these, kind of, whether they're desaturated or whether they're quite rich or whether they're dark, just sort of depends on which orange you put them with. But essentially, oranges and light blues like each other. That's a very easy way to think about it. So, what better way to demonstrate that than showing you a colour scheme with it? So I've just taken those two complementary colours, those two opposites on the wheel, and I've just paired them up on all of the main elements of this miniature. This is an Orc Blood Bowl player. You can see like where the orange gets lighter, the blue that's near it also gets lighter, so the lighting pattern is also uniform. And just make sure that everywhere that there's a lot of orange, there's a lot of blue. You can even break the blue up with those rust effects there that kind of add a bit of that orange element into the blue. And this works with any two complements. You just pick two colours opposite each other on the colour wheel, and if you plot them next to each other and sort of spread them out, use areas like you see the hair there is neutral because it's brown, the silver is neutral, and so basically anywhere that there's two colours beside each other, you make sure they're two of these complementary colours, and it looks banging. Okay, so that's really straightforward. Now let's look at something a little bit more complicated. Let's take a couple of complementaries, say, let's go with pink and green. That's two really nice colours that sit opposite each other on the colour wheel. They're both colours that I'm really keen on, so they make sense for me to use personally. We can see that the sort of bright saturated bubblegummy pinks go kind of opposite the neon-y limey kind of greens, so that's pretty straightforward. I take a look in my paint collection and I can see that I've got these, Punk Rock Pink and Alien Goo, both from Reaper. They are complementary to each other. They're roughly opposite each other on the colour wheel. So now you're going to see some really sped up footage of me doing a blend that starts with that green and blends into the pink. And what I'm trying to demonstrate here is basically that you don't just have to lay complementary colours side by side flatly. What you can do is actually use them as part of a blend scheme to create something that looks really sweet. Now, that doesn't even necessarily need to just be like a straight blend like I'm doing here. You could maybe base coat, say, the skin of something with a luminous pink, and then build those neon greens in as the highlights. So like the complementary colour forms the highlight. That's a really weird thing to think about. But as you see when this blend gets revealed now, they look so nice together, even on a smooth blend. Okay, so we've covered simple and complex. Let's go for something tough. I want to talk about now some cool things you can do using complements with skin tones. So you see opposite these kind of skin tones, we've got these sort of desaturated blues. Okay, so that tells us that a complementary colour for skin is a desaturated blue, but you'd never use that in a skin workup, right? Well, with a bit of thought, there's some ways that you can. So here you see I've got some Beiring blue next to a miniature with flesh tone on it. And if I start spraying that into the shadow areas on this guy, you can see very quickly that it stands out and it looks cool. And the first couple of coats, you know, it's a bit grey because you've got that kind of warm colour, that cold colour cancelling each other out. But as you start to build it up more and more, you sort of look at it and you go, okay, we might be onto something here. You know, complements in skin, okay, that could work, that could be a thing. And so I had this Beiring blue, and then I'm looking at, I want more, so now I come back to my colour wheel and I go, well, adjacent to blue, these desaturated blues, I have these more saturated blues, these kind of royal blues and dark blues. Now I could maybe pull the shadows down a bit more using those, while still kind of keeping in the neighbourhood of the same effect. So I'm looking to, you know, near my complementary colour because I don't want to disturb it too much. Now that just happens to be the kind of blues that Ezren blue falls into, which, as you know, is one of my favourites. I use it on the channel all the time. So now I'm going to start squirting some Ezren blue into these shadows just to reinforce them, to darken them up a bit more. And you can see now that this is really starting to make that skin tone pop. It's really accentuating the warmness that's present in it, which is super handy because, you know, skin can get washed out looking really, really easily. So knowing that cold tones can help combat that, that's a really good tool for the arsenal. So we start out with just reinforce some of that Beiring blue using some of this Ezren, and now you can see we're getting a lot more pop to it, but it doesn't look shadowed enough now, it's not dark enough. So I go back to my colour wheel again and I look at that royal blue and I see that opposite it are these kind of golden yellows. Obviously that's not going to shadow it if I had a golden yellow. So if I sample that yellow in Photoshop and I start to pull downwards, it becomes very apparent that browns are in that same colour range. So if you think of brown as being dark yellow, then essentially brown is still a complementary to these kind of saturated royal blues. So that's cool. Let's grab wildwood then. So I grab some wildwood and I thin the bollocks off of it and I load it into the airbrush. And now we start to use some wildwood to further these shadows. And I'll be honest, this is experimental. This is not something that I've ever done before, but it's an example of me using theory and application to know that something's going to work without needing to have done it before. So as we get to this guy now being sort of looking kind of done, he's going to sit and do a little dance for you. I would then start working over this with like some stripy kind of textured skin stuff. But now that's the practical stuff out of the way. There's one last bit of theory that I want to go over with you that's really, really useful as an add-on to all this stuff about complements. And that is triads. This is the one other really important theoretical element for miniature painting. So there's this really cool tool from Adobe called Adobe Color. I'll link it in the description. And basically it gives you triads. So these are colours that are approximately a third of the way around the colour wheel from each other. And when you put them together as a three, you can basically make a colour scheme with them. And what the Adobe Color tool also does is it gives you a shade for each of your main tones in your triad. So the idea would be that you have the main tone and the shade tone for each of the two sort of major colours that you want to use, and then it gives you a third colour that you can use as an accenting complement. So the idea is that the third colour, the one that's only got a single colour represented, you would use more sparingly in the workup. And again, this literally works with anything. You can just pick from this wheel and it will give you a paint scheme. It is brilliant. So come on, that was pretty painless, wasn't it? Let's be real. Underneath all of that crap that people talk about it's actually, the concepts are pretty simple. Basically, complements and triads are like the two main things that you're going to use in your miniature painting. When it comes to, you know, applying color theory, there are other more advanced things you can use. That Adobe tool is brilliant for explaining other types of ways that you can make colors work together. It's foolproof because you just pick a color that you want to base your workup around and then you go and it gives you the rest. So, you know, there's easy ways to self-teach and to get your head around this kind of thing. But honestly, the best thing to do is just try it. Just pick, you know, two complements or pick a triad and paint a miniature with it. just have some fun. Go crazy with it. See what happens. Honestly, applying colour theory to your miniatures just makes that pop, that beautiful little you know the you know the I know what I mean. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here for another week. I'll see you next week, folks. We'll have another long video and another short video. But in the meantime, please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, because that helps me get seen. And if you have any comments or you have any questions or you just want to tell me that I'm an idiot, comment below and we'll deal with that at the time. Thanks a lot, folks. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now.